Two friends meet up to drink some beers and talk about past times. Not yesterday, but long ago, it's scandals, wars and crimes. From Stalin's reign to Prohibition, Tudors, Pompey, Bush and NASA's mission, Edison's bulk, Genghis Khan's rise to victory. Forget your old teacher, it's time for Pint-Sized History.
Well, hi there, and welcome to the Pint-Sized History podcast, the podcast where we talk about the landmark events in the past that have changed the modern world we live in today. I'm Zack.
And I'm Joe.
And today, you might be wondering why I'm doing this kooky accent. Just because we're going all the way back to the early 20th century America.
No one's wondering that. No one's wondering that because they've clicked on the episode that says Prohibition. So they see that we're talking about America. Everyone's gone, oh, we're doing Prohibition, so he's going to do an American accent. You're like, well, I bet you're wondering why I'm doing this American accent. Well, it's obvious, isn't it, mate?
Well, maybe not to some people. But anyway, as you know, on Pint-Sized History, you've ruined my flow.
I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. I was enjoying that. But as you know, on the Pint-Sized History podcast, we like to have a little bit of a drink when we talk about our subjects.
We do,
and
yeah.
Today, even more so, because we're talking about Prohibition.
But also, mate, this is the end of season 1. We want to take a short break before the next year, before Christmas. So want to have a chance to like rethink some ideas and think about how we want to go do things going forward. Yeah. So we thought we'd
It's very
end
hard.
this.
It's very hard to do a podcast.
It's not that hard. It's not.
It looks quite easy starting a podcast, but as we've gone into it, it's not as easy as it looks, I must say.
It's not that difficult, but it is. It can take a while, and there are the editing does add up. So yeah, we just want to take a short break to figure out exactly what we want to do next, and figure out exactly how we're going to do things before Christmas. And in the meantime, we thought, why don't we end the season with a really fun, more jokey, more ideas. So it was me that's doing the Prohibition for our final episode, and I thought, why don't we make this into a drinking game? The number one request that we've had since starting this podcast is people go, why are you the Pint-Sized History podcast and yet you don't drink with pints? So we thought, you know what, it's about time that we followed that tradition. So we now have pints in front of us that we will be drinking. And not only that, but for this episode specifically, it's going to be a drinking game. Zack is my guinea pig that is going to have to enjoy this. He doesn't know what's going to happen. So he's going to have to figure this all out, figure out how drunk he's going to be after 2 hours' time.
Well, yeah. Well, I must say, we've actually, and I probably shouldn't say this, but we've already been drinking.
Before this podcast, I decided to lube Zack up with a pint or two. So he's ready to go. We're ready to sink into this and see how drunk can we get Zack from the Traitors. So here we go. you had
to jump in them from the Traitors, didn't you? You can't resist.
This is how the game's going to work. I have got the story of the Prohibition here. Any time that I ask a question to Zack, if he gets it wrong, he has to drink 2 fingers of his pint. If he gets it right,
cheeky,
then I have to drink those 2 fingers. So it's up to Zack to prove his intelligence, which was, probably your main asset on the show. Right?
I'm going to make a bold prediction, say that you're going to be drinking more than I am today.
There you go.
And I think, honestly, by an effing landslide.
That's the Zack from the Traitors I know. Just questions on the Prohibition wouldn't be enough. So I've actually got 10 questions here that I'm going to intersperse throughout the episode. Random questions about history or drinking or both.
Oh.
So there's a lot of questions to answer.
I'm so excited.
And I'm worried for you. Honestly, I'm worried for you.
So I've got plenty of beers. Don't have to worry about me.
I feel like we should quickly just state the Prohibition, if you're not aware, was this insane period in the early 1900s where, for some reason, America deemed that they didn't want to drink alcohol, that they wanted to take a freedom away from themselves.
A religious reason?
Oh, Jesus. What do you think we're going to talk about? Of course we're going to talk about the reasons, baby. So don't you worry, mate. We're going to get right into all that stuff. So what I learned about this by researching is actually that America had a huge drinking problem, especially back in the day, in the sense that everything had to do with drinking. Literally everything. You basically couldn't do things unless you were drinking. In the work life, everyone was drinking. And I mean like working with heavy machinery, heavy equipment. Everyone was drinking. It was literally part of the culture. It gives you a buzz, during your work. Deals. America's the land of business and opportunity. You couldn't make deals unless you had a glass of something.
You got to be drunk to make a deal. That's the famous old saying.
I mean,
if you're not drunk, you can't make a deal.
You laugh, but I'm genuinely telling the truth. That is the fact in the 1800s that was how things were.
Jeez.
Yeah. So
good on you. Good on you, America. Didn't know you had that in you.
Another thing in the 1800s was that saloons were a key part of the American culture. They were a place that men went after work, in the day, and it was basically a men-only space. They essentially went there to escape their families, literally to escape their families. Like their wife and their children would be at home, and the men would literally just be chilling at the saloon and drinking. Women weren't even allowed in these saloons. If they came in, they'd have to come in through the back door, and they would be sat in a different part of the saloon from the men to have their own time. It was a time of segregation in that sense. Women were very much seen as the home bodies. It wasn't culturally acceptable for women and men to be drinking in the same place. To be honest, it wasn't really culturally acceptable for women to be drinking at all near men. It was that period of time.
Really?
Yeah. Children would start drinking from about 12 or 13. Teenagers weren't a thing then. So once you started showing signs of puberty, you were now a man. You were now able to go to the saloon. You were able to start working. Kids would be drinking from a very young age. Right, that's enough time for some boring backstory. It's quiz number 1 time, Zach.
Woo!
It is our Prohibition special, and so I want you to answer this question about drinking.
Woohoo!
In what modern-day country was the earliest alcohol ever discovered? And I have 4 choices.
Okay, multiple choice, that helps.
A, Iran.
Okay.
B, Egypt. C, China. Or D, Israel.
I thought China... It would be...
Oh, no, hold on. I mean, none of these countries, except for Egypt... I mean, this is so long back that these were before they were the countries that we know today.
All right.
The modern-day country, that we know of, in that, area, was the first drinking.
I would say, based on the fact that I had a thought that it might be China when you asked the question, that it was China.
Funnily enough, all 4 of these are actually the earliest in one way or another. So Iran was the first alcoholic beverage found, which was 7,000 years ago.
Wow.
Egypt was the first medicinal use of alcohol 4,000 years ago. China was the earliest evidence of wine 9,000 years ago. And in a prehistorical burial site near Haifa, researchers found residue of a 13,000-year-old beer.
So
the answer is Israel. 2 drinks, please. 2 fingers. Interesting though, isn't it? Israel is where the first bevies were. Well, it's the first recorded evidence.
the Holy Land.
Beer as well. They loved a beer. Anyway, back to the Prohibition. As you can imagine, from what I've just told you about the culture in America in the 1800s, women found themselves at the brunt of this epidemic. At the end of the day, if everyone's an alcoholic, then who suffers the most? One of the answers would be a housewife, because the housewife not only has all these responsibilities to deal with, they are not often the providers of families at this point. So they are relying on these men that are often getting so drunk they can't work or, getting fired or whatever.
You bum.
Yeah,
Get up.
they
work, you bum.
need them to be more responsible, and alcoholics were a dime a dozen at this point. Not only that, but obviously there would be a lot of abusive husbands. Domestic abuse, is not a problem that's been fixed at this point. Imagine what it was like over 140 years ago when there was no concept of alcoholism. Men would come back blind drunk and be horrible to their families. It was always a sin in Christianity, in Protestant life. It is absolutely a sin to drink too much. And so women decided that enough was enough. And so the first temperance movement was made, and women were a big part of it. They were the first real cohort that said, this is not okay. And they used it as like a morality issue, right? They would pray outside saloons after not being allowed in and saying like, hey, please, guys, you're hurting not only your relationship with God, but your relationship with your family and the community. Please.
What a way to kill the vibe.
That's definitely what they thought. It's definitely what the men thought inside.
I'm glad times have shifted, I must say.
I mean, from then, oh my God, it's horrific.
It's a shame that women at that time have to resort to a religious movement to stop their, probably to stop domestic abuse.
Yeah, well, it's not just the domestic abuse, but they feel like alcohol is ruining a lot of life. For Americans in general, and I think it's totally fair. What I do learn after researching this is that actually this is a huge time period for America and the culture of America. Everything changes over this time, which is why I think I didn't realize how interesting it was. When I started researching, I realized like there's so much to this, and I thought it was brilliant.
Well, it's roaring 20s, isn't it?
Well, absolutely, but who cares about that, because it's time for quiz question number 2. That's right, we've got 10 of these, so we've got to get through them. Here we go, mate.
This is not going to get old.
Zach, I'd like you to tell me, what other nations around the same time had their own national temperance movements which became national prohibitions? You have 3 guesses to get 1 right answer.
Oh, well, just one?
You just need to get one of these. There's on my list, I've got 3 countries.
Any clues?
No. You've got 3 guesses.
Okay.
Use your sharp brain, as I know you can.
Germany.
No.
Maybe it's just not European at all. Russia.
No. Russia's an interesting one because actually the Prohibition took a lot of their ideas from a national vodka ban.
Japan.
No.
Fuck.
Norway, Finland, and Canada.
I was thinking about saying Canada.
Canada,
I
you
honestly,
could've got.
Canada. I was like, it can't be Canada.
Canada's
It's still
the
like
obvious one.
Commonwealth. And
I might
Britain
have
never
given you
banned it.
India as well because they actually did also have one, but it was only in certain provinces.
Jeez.
But and it was also much later.
2 fingers.
I'm going to tell you a story now. I'm going to tell you the story of one lady called Carrie Nation. Born in 1846 in Kentucky, Caroline Amelia Nation. I forgot what last name.
It's a great name, that.
Caroline
Carry Nation.
Yeah, I
Carry
agree.
the nation on your back.
Well, and she did.
My friend.
Watch this. Watch this space. She had a history marred by booze. Her first husband was a severe
Classic
alcoholic
Carrie.
and died less than 2 years after they married and only 1 year after the birth of their daughter. She developed a strong activism against alcohol after this. Kansas, where she was nearby, had a ban on the sale of liquor, but it was not enforced. This is just a classic, to be honest. Many places had their own state laws about certain things, and often
The
when it came
optics.
to drinking, they just didn't care. You know, there were plenty of saloons and bars that actually should have been illegal or just shouldn't have been allowed, and in reality, no one cared at all. So,
Sort of like vapes these days with kids.
yeah,
No one really
sure.
cares that the kids on the street are smoking the vapes.
Sure. You keep saying that. Carrie started peacefully protesting outside the saloons and bars, but nothing was happening. That she was protesting, no one would care. So, what did she do one day?
Burn one down?
You know what? It's incorrect, but I will let you have it because, well, to be fair, it's so obvious that she does something with it.
Yeah.
No, drink. That's not close enough.
Sorry, this is not part of the contract we agreed. That wasn't a question.
Yeah, it is. Anytime I ask you a question, you have to deal with it. I'll let you finish that because there's not much left. So, what does she do one day after being awakened by a voice, presumably God, who knows, telling her to go down to the town and smash it? She goes to the local bar, she grabs some rocks, and she starts pelting them through the saloon, shouting, and this is a quote, "Men, I have come to save you from your drunken fate." So that's what she does on the first day. From then on, she goes on a trail of destruction, right? Where this sweet middle-aged lady is now traveling from town to town, destroying saloons in the name of the Lord, using only rocks and a hatchet. And she'd go into the bar and she'd start whacking all the
You're gonna fuck with the crazy lady with the hatchet and rocks.
All right, Jesus, calm down.
Oh,
And
well,
just
stop drinking. Okay, you made your point.
And bear in mind, by the way, women weren't allowed the vote at this point. So for Carrie Nation to basically take matters into her own hands, she's not even allowed to vote on the state of the country, but she's decided to just, whack-a-mole, just destroy a place. And she was arrested over 30 times. But she just either was paid her way out or they just eventually let her go. She became a national icon, essentially. Sadly, though, this time period, women weren't allowed to vote. The movement, as much as they tried, didn't have the real traction that it should have. And so eventually, it didn't fizzle out, but it didn't make the groundwork that they wanted. Nothing came of it, sadly.
Yeah.
It's a shame.
But, kudos to her.
Kudos to Carrie. It's a great story.
Who let
It's an
her
awesome
cook?
story. Right. It's time for a top 10, Zach. And I'd like you to tell me something that has nothing to do with history at all. I'd like you to tell me what are the top 10 most consumed alcoholic beverages in the world today.
Okay. And how am I right to not drink a finger?
That's a good question. I think if you get the majority, I'll allow you. I'll drink this one.
Beer,
Number 1.
vodka,
Number 6.
gin,
Number 9.
rum,
Number 8.
sambuca.
No.
Tequila.
10th.
Ales.
That's under beer.
Okay. Whiskey.
5th, yeah.
Scotch.
Scotch is whiskey.
Rice wine. Or wine.
Wine would be better, yeah, and that's 2nd. Rice wine is sake, right?
Yeah.
That's 13th, so no.
Okay. Oh, God.
You need one more, and you don't need to drink for this one.
What have I got so far? I've got everything, though.
One's similar to beer, but isn't beer.
Cider.
That's what I was saying.
Come on.
Cider, well done. That's 7th. You
Joe,
don't
I
need, you
believe you should drink two
I
fingers.
will. You don't need to get the last two because you've won the
I
challenge.
don't think I can get them.
And I don't think you're going to get them. It's third and fourth you've missed. One you won't get. I knew you wouldn't get it because I wouldn't get it. Baiju, which is a Chinese spirit.
Baiju?
Yeah, only drunk in China, or mostly drunk in China. So we wouldn't know about it.
Yeah.
But makes sense, right? That a Chinese alcoholic drink would be up there. Third, liqueur.
Liqueur.
Liqueur, yeah. So apparently number one for liqueurs is Bailey's.
Baileys.
And
God.
Malibu is number second. I'll give you another thing. You can double down on this, but you have to get them both right first time.
Mm.
Beer was first, and it's actually the third most drunken beverage worldwide. What are the two before beer?
Well, water.
Yes.
And I want to say like Coca-Cola or something, but I don't want to actually say it.
Soft drinks or fizzy drinks, and that caption is like 8th or 9th. The answer is tea.
Tea. Obviously tea.
Coffee is like 5th or 6th, which I was surprised by. I thought it'd be more. Anyway, well done. You've actually got one right.
Yeah,
or
I would like to see you take your two fingers,
I'll get my
please.
2 fingers now. Hold on. Right, shall we get back to the Prohibition?
Yes.
So I told you how women couldn't do enough really to make this into the movement that they wanted and push it forward on the national agenda. But in the 1910s, things changed.
Yeah.
Other groups started to get involved. For example, big business. They were worried that the production force of America was, because drinking was so heavy.
Yeah.
Men were drinking at work all the time, and if you're in a heavy production line, in a huge industrial era of building, especially for wars, and cars were a thing. So two big people in this was Henry Ford and John D. Rockefeller.
Really?
They both heavily pushed for prohibition at the time.
Is that because you get the days before accident sign in America?
Pretty much,
and every day in America was 0.
Yeah,
0
exactly.
days.
If you're drunk.
God damn it, Jimmy's falling the fucking machine again.
Yeah, it was becoming dangerous, and they were worried that it was hurting productivity. The main lobbyist group for the Prohibition was the Anti-Saloon League. And they slowly grew into becoming the biggest lobbyist group in America. They were so powerful that they could essentially, turn elections. They would push so heavily that if you weren't for the Prohibition, then it was unlikely you were going to keep your mayor seat or your governor's seat or your Senate seat. They were very, very heavy on you and used a lot of pressure politics. Then, of course, something that is quite interesting, actually, is that in the 1910s, this movement this Prohibition movement, it took quite a right-wing turn because it kind of melded with the anti-immigration movement.
Yeah.
Because it made sense for the narrative, if you were Prohibition, to be that it was the immigrants that were coming in and making us all drunks. Well, exactly. but what's really interesting is, yes, the Irish with their whiskey, the Italians with their wine, and the most interesting one is, here's another question for you. What happens in the 1910s?
World War One.
And who are America fighting in World War One?
The Germans.
And Germans were the main manufacturers of beer in America.
Really?
Yeah. German immigrants were huge in America, huge, and
Really?
And the breweries.
I never really heard about
Yeah,
that
and the
very much.
breweries of America were predominantly German.
Like Bud.
Yeah, Budweiser.
I think that's actually Prague. I think it's Czech, actually.
Miller's was a German man called Muller.
Really?
Changed his name to Miller.
Those Americans
that's
changing names willy-nilly.
So, you get it right. You can see how the cogs are turning. Well, the world is changing. There's World War One. Propaganda against this German machine is happening. And at the same time...
Stop drinking because you're fueling the German war machine.
Exactly.
Ooh.
Interesting, isn't it?
Very,
Interesting how that works.
yeah, that's crazy, isn't it?
And it's funny how literally our last podcast was about World War One, and we're actually doing one about pretty much the same time period. And this is how it was fueling the American way of life at the time. America joined the war in 1917, so it was really 1917 that the idea of prohibition really grew in people's minds, because suddenly
How can we support Germany
how can
and
we
find them at the same
how can we
time?
support America and fuck off the Germans, basically? How do we piss them off? Let's stop buying their beer. As is the case in America, lots of states were doing their own bans anyway. A lot of states have their own power. They started banning alcohol, whatever. But the Anti-Saloon League wanted more. So they decided they wanted this to become a proper federal thing. So they wanted to get it on the Constitution, which is obviously which is very rare.
Yeah, how many times in your mind in recent years has the American Constitution been amended?
The last one was in the 80s.
Yeah.
I had to research.
What was that for?
Something to do with the House of Representatives.
Really?
There's been 27 amendments since America was created 350 years ago.
So that's how much power they wielded.
They
wielded so much power they genuinely thought they could change the Constitution.
And
to
they
do
did.
So. They did.
And they did.
Kudos. Well done, Anti-Saloon League. I mean, I personally disagree with everything you stand for, but well done.
They ratified it on January the 16th, 1919, And on exactly 1 year later, the USA became a dry country in January 17th, 1920.
So I imagine scenes like the one behind your head. We do like to bring you to the pictures behind us, but if you look closely, if you're watching the video broadcast, we can see behind Joe's head there's a picture of two men in what looks to be an American town pouring the liquor down the sewers.
Yes, it became ratified in 1919. So in 1919, we knew there was going to be 1 year until the Prohibition started. So this was now a time of preparing for the future. And essentially exactly that. I'm going to tell you some laws about how it all works. But first, ding, 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 it's time for a quiz question.
It's been so long.
It's Prohibition
It's been
episode.
so long.
And we've got to have a question. So
Question me
Zach
up, Daddy.
is question number 4. You ready?
Go on.
Vincent van Gogh was a very notorious drinker. He absolutely loved it. That's what I've written down.
Did you put that in italics?
He absolutely loved it. In fact, many of his works of art include food, drink, like beer bottles and
That's
stuff.
what it is.
Literally.
Food and drink is art.
Yeah, sure.
Don't at me.
Fine. My question is, what was Vinny's favourite drink?
Vinny.
Was he an absinthe man? Was
Ooh.
he a red wine man? Was he a brandy man? Or was he a champagne man? I'll give you some to help you. He lived in Paris.
Champagne.
Champagne for Vinny?
Champagne.
That's incorrect. 2 drinks.
Fuck.
The actual answer was absinthe.
I thought it was so vague. I was like, there's no way it could be absinthe. It's
Because
too
that's why I
vague.
included
Yeah,
it.
it's like it's so off.
I should have gone for it. Apparently, absinthe was rife in Paris.
Really?
During that time period. Yeah, he loved it. Apparently, he loved popping a couple of cold absinthes with the boys. that was his thing, man. It was the scene in Paris.
I'm absolutely certain then if he was a big absinthe drinker, the decision to cut his ear off happened when he was drinking
When he
absinthe.
was absinthing it up.
No
Possibly.
good decision has ever made drinking absinthe.
Now, at this point, where are we at? The country has decided to make the big decision to get rid of alcohol. Alcohol business was actually the 5th biggest business industry
Really?
in America at the time, which seems crazy that you would just suddenly take that away.
What are people going to spend their money on?
Well, exactly. What happens to all that booze that is in that country? And do people just stop wanting to drink it once it's gone? You know, a lot of people are addicted to this stuff, even if they didn't realize it at the time. It was illegal to sell it, to buy it, to make it, and to transport it. But it was fine to drink it
Ooh.
and to
loophole.
have it, like to hold possession of it in your own home or something like that.
Okay.
With that in mind, you can imagine that there are a lot of loopholes being placed. So people continue to drink. Now, apparently the amount of people drinking did actually go down.
People stockpiled before the Constitution got ratified?
I've actually got that written down later, but exactly, yeah. So bars, or places that had a big stockpile already would just put it in a spot and just keep it. And some places, literally some private clubs were able to just hold it onto it for the entire time that the Prohibition was happening. So although people were doing it, they were still scared, especially at the beginning, and there was a lot of people that kind of after a while wanted to get back into drinking.
Yeah.
The good thing was that the consequences just weren't there, because the government, this right-wing government and this right-wing movement to get rid of it is also right-wing. And a big thing with the right wing is that they want small government, not much influence. So they did not have a big agency to deal with the Prohibition. And in fact, there was the agency that was meant to deal with any problems with the Prohibition, anyone that was doing stuff illegally, hoarding stuff, selling stuff, there was nowhere near enough manpower to be able to
Would it
deal
have been
with
the FBI?
No, they had a specific government agency to deal with deal with the Prohibition. Yeah, it was underfunded.
The DEA
barely had any amount to deal with it, and so that's great. That means that it's actually fairly easy for people to drink, even though there is this illegal business of drinking. It's like the government is so stupid. It's like this movement. It kind of reminds me of Brexit in the sense that it's kind of like this movement that said, "Hey, let's do this. This would be such a good idea." And once they implement it, they're like,
No plan.
We didn't think about this actually. Yeah, there's still people drinking. Funnily enough, officials were drinking. It was so corrupt.
How unsurprising.
Everything was corrupt in America at this time. The corruption breeded from the fact that there was a prohibition. There were officials that were literally getting, bootlegged drinks that they could just take and drink away. In fact, even the new president, Warden Harding, who had campaigned on a pro-prohibition stance, loved a drink.
Yeah.
And apparently he kept a secret stash in the second floor of the White House, which he'd give to anyone at any point. So it's like every
Hypocrites.
politician.
An ancient hypocrites.
It was they all said let's do it
reckon-
and then didn't care.
Do you reckon anti-Saloon League members love to drink?
I'm sure some of them did, yeah. One rule for them, another for us. It was a classic case of that.
That's not persisted.
Right.
History will never show you there's one rule for the elite, one rule for the others.
Couldn't agree with you more there. And funnily enough, you mentioned that because it's time for another question.
Whoa.
Ding, 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 ding. It's question number 5 of our big quiz. And I would like you to answer the question, which of these great military leaders is it argued had a severe drinking problem?
Okay.
A, Alexander the Great.
Ooh, okay.
B, Genghis Khan. C, Napoleon.
I feel like Genghis is the obvious shout. I don't feel like you could do what he did, though, if you were drunk. Neither Alexander. So Napoleon strikes me as a bit of a strange guy, so I don't know if it's actually... I just don't get the idea that he was like as socially liberal as like the other two could be. Genghis was a madman, and you think maybe the fact that he was crazy might have stemmed from being drunk all the time, potentially? I'm going to go for Genghis.
Your final answer?
My final is Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan? Incorrect. 2 drinks. So Genghis Khan apparently barely drank at all. This is obviously this is room for interpretation. We don't know for sure, and there's not that many records about if he was an alcoholic or not. But it was actually the indication that he was actually very self-disciplined and obstinate to.
You'd imagine so. I was going to say, you imagine so, given the achievements he made.
Well, apparently other Khans in Mongolian history were, but Genghis Khan just wasn't.
Really?
It wasn't his thing. If it wasn't him that you went for, who would you have gone for next?
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great is correct. Funnily enough, there's no real way of knowing, especially for Alexander the Great, because it was so long ago. But there's actually a lot of theorists, a lot of historians that debate whether he was a alcoholic.
He was quite young, though, which is why
he was very young, and he did apparently love a drink. Like, he would often have like parties with his generals where they just get smashed and play games, like literally play like board games, not board games, but like
chess.
Not chess,
Mahjong,
whatever was the equivalent in that time. And apparently, he actually killed a friend of his, a close friend of his, in his 30s. Cloutus, I think, Clitus. He killed him with a spear while they were both drunk. Quickly, Napoleon did not enjoy drinking that much.
Didn't.
To be fair, he did drink. He apparently had like red wine or brandy at times. He's French after all. He didn't enjoy being under the influence.
No.
Apparently, he absolutely binged coffee.
Really?
But he was not a wine drinker.
That does not surprise me.
There you go. Did you enjoy those 2 sips?
Well, they taste as good as the 200 or 300 sips beforehand. So yeah, I would say good.
Well, that's good because I've got another question for you now. So good luck, Zach. What is a speakeasy?
A speakeasy is it's like a building in the 1920s America which fashions itself as something else or looks like it's something else, but in reality it's just a pub. So it's somewhere that people can go to. It's like behind like a weird sort of door, something that may not be a conventional door, and you open it up and inside there's basically a bar with loads of drinks there, so where people can get illegal drinks. And I know that because I watched Boardwalk Empire, which I don't know if any of you have watched, but it's a great series. Really not respected enough, but Steve Buscemi,
right?
Excellent. Their whole thing is like running speakeasies and stuff like that. So yeah, I went to one in Edinburgh, and it was like this strange. You go down this weird staircase, and behind this, I think you've ever been to like a carnival or something, like a fair, and they have like the psychic lady in the machine booth thing. Yeah. So you open that up, and behind that was a bar. So that's what's speaking. So I see you're drinking, Joe, and I believe you should have 2 sips, not just one, 2 sips.
I will.
Please.
You've got it correct. Well done. 2 sips coming right up. Because alcohol was rare, and all of a sudden it was rare, it became glamorous. It became seductive, exciting. And so there was always going to be places that people went to drink, but there were plenty of speakeasies that essentially became these kind of hubs for this really dramatic Roaring Twenties style party. Like something that America never really seen before. It was away from government regulation, and it was away from all this, like, all the boundaries that had happened before it were no longer in place. And I find this really interesting. They were essentially, often like theaters or bars or, big spaces that had everything. They had big tables with lots of drinking and singing. They had performances on stage. They had dancers, flappers. They had big bars. Flappers was like
cabaret.
Yeah, kind of like the girls that would wear like scantily clad for those times, that would do like the big jive dances. One thing to bear in mind at this point is that the 18th Amendment was Prohibition. The 19th Amendment was women's right to vote. Happened the same year as Prohibition.
Shout out suffragettes.
So imagine the difference between what I told you at the beginning of the podcast 20 years ago and this moment in the 1920s. This is a huge moment in equality, because what happens is that the women that were not allowed to be in saloons had to go in through the back entrance and did not feel part of the society, weren't allowed to drink alongside men. These speakeasies come up and suddenly it's illegal for anyone to attend. It's not just frowned upon for women to attend, it's illegal for anyone to. So the norms of society no longer apply. And what happens is women go, and suddenly for the first time men are drinking in a bar alongside women, and it's acceptable, it's normal, it's completely, it becomes the norm. And so it's really fascinating how these women, that either their parents or even their older sisters felt so far away from society, within years they're like buoyed by the fact that they have the right to vote. We're now, equality's on the rise, here we go, this is our time to shine. And they go into these places and it builds this completely different environment.
I guess for women it moved quickly, right? It's with the birth of the suffragette movement, women's rights just like poof, not overnight, but like very, very quickly
compared to the past.
Equality had been a mainstay, and that's the thing with politics. It's not, the suffragette movement was incredible, and getting women the right to vote is an insane achievement. But then as soon as you become part of the electorate, and as soon as you play a part in politics, then it just makes everything just fly up another degree. Like as soon as you're like a big voice in what could get potentially someone elected as president or as prime minister in the UK, policies and businesses and organizations will start catering to you far more. So like, you know, following on from that, it will move fast, and that's what politics shows us. It
is fascinating, isn't it? This sudden change just it breeds this opportunity for new life, and I just find that, because I've never thought about that as a concept, that these roaring 20s where you see these, you know, everyone dancing together in these kind of speakeasies, you
always see men and women,
exactly. And I did not think that was the first time. Literally imagine being a man at that time. You just you know, imagine you saw your dad, and you can stay in the saloon playing cards, be on his own, and suddenly you're like,
now it's a party.
Just feel it's so the culture has changed so much. Interestingly enough, obviously, doesn't even need to be stated. It's not just women. For equality, African Americans at this time, because jazz and blues is now is one of the most played music in these types of speakeasies. You know, slavery had ended in about a lifetime ago, but it was still so difficult for black people to feel accepted among the electorate. And all of a sudden, finally, something that's come from the black movement, from the African American people, is now part of a fun, exciting, sexy, glamorous ideas. Like, let's play some blues and let's have some fun and let's get the jazz going. It's fascinating how it weirdly, Prohibition, despite being such a weird concept, ends up improving all these equality, you know, movements and stuff like that. Something I found really interesting researching it. It's time for question number 6.
Whoa!
One of my favorite drunk stories ever is the story of Boris Yeltsin in Washington, D.C. in the 1990s.
Oh,
do you
God,
know this?
I know you said, I don't remember it.
Oh, mate, it's so
it.
good. I'm excited to tell you. So, in September 1994, he took a state visit to America. It wasn't his first. He'd done a few before this point. But it was a state visit to Washington, and he went and visited Bill Clinton, who was the president at the time. And we didn't know this story until years afterwards, when Bill Clinton told it. I don't know if it was in a book or if he told it as an anecdote.
You did not have sexual relations with that woman, Joe.
That was a different story. So apparently, in the middle of the night, Secret Service agents discovered an extremely drunk, clad in his underwear, Boris Yeltsin on Pennsylvania Avenue. So literally, the Russian president is on the main street of the White House in America in the 1990s, naked in the middle of the night, drunk as fuck. He's calling for a taxi. And they're like, is that Boris Yeltsin? So they go up to him and say, sir, is everything all right? And they're trying to cordle him back to his home. And he goes, no, I need a taxi and I need a certain type of food. And that is the quiz question to you. What
Big Mac
food? I'm going to give you multiple choice. A, sushi. B, burgers. C, hot dogs. Or D, pizza.
It was B, burgers. I think he wanted a Big Mac.
Incorrect. Drink 2 sips.
Fuck off.
My boy Boris wanted some pizza. He wanted some Washington pizza.
Some real Brooklyn pizza.
Bill Clinton said he got his pizza.
Yeah, of course he did.
Before he went to bed. And you know what the funniest part is? The funniest part is he tried it again the next night. It wasn't one time
underwear. Was he on his underwear?
No, this time, I don't know, but this time he didn't get out of the building before they stopped him. But apparently, literally the next night, he did it again, where he was like, I need to go outside and eat some pizza. What a story that is. What a story. Zach, I'd like you to tell me, what is a bootlegger?
A bootlegger is someone... Is this a two-finger question?
Every question I ask you is a quiz.
Get ready to finger that drink, boy. A bootlegger is someone that illegally traffics alcohol. They might take it from an illegal brewer in some like rural place in America and take it to a speakeasy, and they are literally shifting the alcohol from one place to another. They're bootleggers.
Pretty much bang on. As you can tell by this point, there's just loopholes everywhere, right? Apparently there was a thing where you could technically sell the ingredients to make it, but not actually it. So there's this awesome thing, I'm not sure what it's called.
This is brilliant. This is so well thought through, isn't it?
Vine Glow or something. I can't remember what it's called, but essentially it's like this paste, like grape thing that they sell you, and it's just like this weird substance, but then it says on the back, don't put this in a bunch of water and then let it stay
cool
there
for half an hour.
for like half a month rather. And then at the end of it, it'll become wine. And so people were buying that like all the time, just having their own.
Oh no!
Yeah.
Oh no!
And yeah, but you could get it anywhere. I mean, literally, like, so for example, whiskey was still considered something that could heal you, medicinal. So doctors were becoming bootleggers because they would literally give out doctor's notes saying this guy needs this.
That chesty cough.
Yeah.
Ooh, a shot of whiskey would heal that right up.
Exactly. And also like the church as well, like Holy Communion, wine. Like there were plenty of corrupt church officials that would just hoard loads of religious wine and just sell it off to someone.
I love it.
It's great.
Does it say something about the human race that we're so just adamantly focused and like loving of alcohol?
Yeah.
Do you reckon it's because like we've set ourselves up in these like systems, these like, these areas of government, these state regulations, and the only way to blow off some steam is by just getting intoxicated, having drugs. Like, it's not really natural living what we're doing right now, and it's very like an above brow thought. But do you think like we have to have these things? We have to have this hunt because we're putting ourselves as humans in such confined positions to what we naturally should be as like Neanderthals and like mammals. Like,
but you say that Neanderthals and mammals. Like the concept of alcohol was not like a thing that we built ourselves. Like there were grapes and fruits and berries that gave you this.
We weren't fermenting them for 30 days or letting them cool in an airtight cylinder.
Mate, that first question, 12,000 years, 13,000 years at the first time that happened, it pretty much was a thought from that very, very beginning age. I think that it was not necessarily. There is actually a theory. I didn't read too much. I saw it, but I didn't look into it too much. This theory that it's literally part of the human psyche that's come since we were like monkeys and touched the first berries, or just like it gave us some high that we've been chasing ever since.
Smoked the first ayahuasca.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know the answer. I mean, I don't think anyone knows. But I do think it's interesting that there's clearly something to every vice. I mean, this isn't the only vice. There are vices that aren't substances, like sex, for example. Isn't there's plenty of people that...
What's that? Never had it.
Yeah. A few drinks done. Here we go, baby. Now we're really cooking. Question number 7. That's right. Ding, 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 ding.
Number
it's
7
time.
already.
Yep. How are you feeling? You feeling a little bit drunk, or
Me.
you can... How many drinks you had at this point?
I think it's my 5th drink.
5th drink. Why was alcohol, and specifically rum, so synonymous with pirates and maritime warfare during the age of piracy?
I feel this is something I should know. I'm going to say, 1, it's more freely available than water, so you can just drink it and it be a liquid to drink. And 2, I think it has health benefits to pirates. So, for example, scurvy and stuff like that. I think drinking alcohol can do a lot to disinfect the bacteria in the mouth, and just a pastime as well.
I don't actually think that's enough, but I am going to give you it because in a way, it does
Two
work.
sips, right? It's too late.
It does work. I'll tell you why. Because so what you're saying is true, although it's kind of an after effect of what happened. Scurvy was battled by fruit and vegetables and stuff, and lemon and lime were actually added later on for the same reasons that I'm about to tell you, and obviously that would help with. So in that sense, it's scurvy. Yeah, exactly. And it was, it was a pastime, obviously. They weren't really the answers I was looking for, but I'll give it to you. I will drink. Just let me explain this first. As the golden age of discovery happened, long sea journeys were more common. And you said at the beginning that alcohol was more, it was more safe than water. That isn't really what we're looking for, but it is in the sense that water would go bad. So the cask barrels that they had on ships would grow algae after a while because, there was nothing to protect water. What they would do is they would pour alcohol, a small amount, not much, but they would pour alcohol into the water supply because it acted as a preservant.
Yeah.
It ended up protecting the water around it, and so it could last for a much longer time by doing that. And the reason I mentioned rum, which was really what I wanted from this,
Yo-ho.
Rum was made in the Caribbean. That's where rum is made. So the most readily available alcohol in the area of piracy, in the area of discovery, was rum. So rum ended up being the drink of choice, not just on ships in general, but the drink of choice for this water and protecting it. And grog was what was created, this kind of watery alcohol, which they got drunk with all the time.
So interesting.
It is really interesting, isn't it? Cheers. We just talked about bootleggers and how they were essentially the distributors of alcohol. Who's going to capitalize on this new trade?
Well, I hate to say, Joe, but this is my area of expertise. I had you fooled into thinking I knew nothing about Prohibition, but I know gangsters. They profited from bootlegging and speakeasies. I've watched Boardwalk Empire. I know the gangsters. I know Al Capone and Lucky Luciano and Arnold Rothstein and Meyer Lansky. They are the people that profited from Prohibition.
Well, I've had my drink because you're absolutely right. Especially in big cities. So places like Chicago and Boston, Detroit, I think New York, all these kind of northern cities, big cities that were just rife for gangs. And they were competing, essentially. Rival gangs were competing to hold the land, to hold the distribution, to hold the actual liquor itself. Even holding stuff like, speakeasies, like in Boardwalk Empire. They are holding this land that they can sell their wares in. The media was constantly framing the Prohibition as this kind of dramatic, bad, not necessarily
unjust
bad, but like
infringement of liberties.
For example, the bad people, the gangsters and the mobsters, the people that were causing harm were treated as Robin Hoods that were, doing these things. Yeah, very liberators. And
I see that. You see that in,
you can understand
in
it,
pop
can't
culture
you?
interpretation.
I mean, even now, gangster movies are still, very present in the modern day. Like it's this concept. They just went with it, and it's really interesting. Like most gangsters and mobsters would try to hide away from the fame that they could get. Like bootleggers all the time are becoming national icons, and gangsters for the most part wanted to stay away because they were so criminal. They were doing so many bad things, killing so many people.
Making a lot of money as well. Making
a lot of money, and they didn't want to lose that up. The one man and the most famous man from the Prohibition that didn't go down that route was Al Capone. And Al Capone was a complete, loved the cameras.
Was his nickname Scarface?
It was.
Or was that because of Al Pacino's character Scarface?
Scarface. His nickname was Scarface because he had that scar on his right hand side of his face, but he didn't like it apparently. He wasn't a fan of that nickname.
I'm not surprised. He probably didn't like the scar he had.
No. So Al Capone was very famous. Apparently he was so big in Chicago that he was able to corrupt everyone to the point where he felt completely comfortable going outside, going to a baseball game, going to a school, going to donate to a charity, being in the street, kind of Godfather-esque where everyone's going, Don Al Capone, and they're just like waving their cap to him, they're like, he was of that level where everyone just respected him. They loved him. Literally, the public loved him. He would be in the newspaper and they would talk about him in a good light. And he was treated as this kind of god of Chicago. When in reality, he was very, very
The
brutal.
Valentine's Day murders.
Yeah,
which are horrible. He kills 13 people in like broad daylight.
Exactly. I think it's 7, but that is the next thing I'm going to say. It literally, that public opinion of him didn't change until the Valentine's Day murders, where on Valentine's Day, a bunch of rival gangs had 7 people killed in cold blood out, just standing out, very public space. I think it was like in a garage or something, but like it was very obvious what was happening. That was the only moment that really changed the perception of him as this not so much of a legend as more of a
Criminal.
Gangster. He was actually charged to 11 years in prison for tax evasion initially.
Yes, they got him tax evasion.
He ended up serving, I believe, only 8 before he was released on bad health because he basically just gone insane. Apparently the time in prison completely did a number on him. He was a shell of the man he was before. And he died in 1947, only 48 years old, of heart failure. Yeah, just one of those interesting stories of the Prohibition. Right, ding, ding, ding. It's time for another question, baby.
I got to refill my drink.
No, yeah, refill your drink while I'm telling you this. Which country elected a prime minister who once reportedly broke the world record for drinking a yard of ale while studying at Oxford University in the 1950s?
This is too obvious. Like, this has got to be a trap, right? It's Winston Churchill.
He was studying at Oxford University in the 1950s.
1950s?
Yeah.
Oh, is it America? I'm just going to say the UK.
I need a final answer, please. America or UK? What are you thinking?
I'm going to say it's Harold Wilson.
Harold Wilson.
I'm going to say it's the UK.
Incorrect. 2 drinks.
Is it Jimmy Carter?
Australia.
Really?
Yeah, so I actually learned this very soon after I came to Australia. Bob Hawke was Prime Minister of Australia in the 1980s. Apparently in the 1950s, he went to Oxford University. No one seems to have, like, utter proof, but it's kind of accepted that this is what happened. And apparently in the bar where it happened, in the pub, in the 14th century pub in Oxford, that this happened, they have like a plaque that commemorates it.
Love our old pubs.
Apparently he downed a yard of ale, and I don't know if you know what a yard is, because
it's the big long tubes with the base and the bottom.
Yeah, so it's 2.5 pints.
Jesus.
So 2.5 of these.
It's not that much.
But you haven't heard how long. It's 2.5 pints, which is 1.4 litres of beer in 11 seconds.
11 seconds?
11 seconds.
That guy's a legend.
That much, that much, and then in 11
That's
seconds.
insane.
Right. That's the Prime Minister of a country. And you know what's funny as well?
I think that only sharpens his credentials.
There's a clip, I recommend you watching this at any point, and you need to see this as well. There's a clip of him at a cricket ground in his 80s, or this is literally like a few years ago, where someone literally hands him a pint of beer, and he's just like, and he's like an old man. He just takes it and he just downs it. And the crowd's going, yeah!
How does it take him, like, a couple seconds?
Yeah, we're not like that quick, but like, you know, he downs it, you know, as we would. And he's obviously like an old bloke.
Aussies, man. Aussies.
And because they're Aussies, they get so hyped.
As someone who's lived in Australia, do you think that Australian drinking culture is quite similar to English drinking culture?
Yeah.
We're quite binge drinkers here.
Yeah,
like,
I
we're
do.
at the pub for hours. And then, do you think they're quite similar to us, or do you think it's like quite the...
Very similar, much more similar than America. I do think that Australia is much more influenced by the landscape. Like, it's so much hotter, so much warmer, so much more chilled. The Australian lifestyle, that I think Australians don't drink in the same way that we do. You know, we sit in a pub and get warm and have hearty chats. Australia is much more having a beer over barbecue or at the beach and, you know, cracking one open. But yes, I think the Australian culture is really similar, drinking culture, and in bad ways as well as good ways. Like, you know, I think there's a lot of alcoholism in a similar scape. But yeah, it's interesting. Australia are very much like us, much more so than many other colonies of ours, ex-colonies. So at this point, we're maybe about 8 years into the Prohibition. And as you can understand, everyone's realising this is a huge mistake.
Yeah.
This has not worked. There's no one regulating it. Everyone's fucking breaking the law. The country is becoming a criminal at this point. Everyone's just doing their own thing. This is a mess. And then the stock market crashes. At this point, 1929, all the problems that had become huge are now, you know, on another level. There's no space to be able to deal with all the crime, all the stuff, because the economy is completely tanked. And in the process, there's no one that can enforce these laws. There's no one that can deal with the consequences of what's going to happen. There's also no one that really cares. That alcohol is not a thing that is on people's minds at this point, because when you are struggling to eat bread, you don't care so much about your alcohol consumption. For many families in America, alcohol and the idea of prohibition just makes no sense anyway. It's like nothing. On the flip side, alcohol was such a huge business for the government. You know, like I said at the beginning, it was the 5th largest industry. So before the prohibition started. So from their perspective, they're thinking we need some fashion to kickstart this economy now that we're in a huge depression and our economy is suffering. We need to bring back alcohol, and it became a big part of the anti-prohibition movement to say, why don't we bring back alcohol and make it something for us to build our economy around. Taken away from that, it's time for question number 9.
Number 9.
We're almost done
two
now.
More to go, thank
Two
God.
more quiz questions for you.
I'm not drunk.
Well, let's hope you get this question right then.
We're in a
Zach.
room with very expensive podcast equipment, and here I am.
Zach, I would like you to tell me who said this quote. If you want to know about a culture, spend a night in its bar. Winston Churchill, Ernest Hemingway, Rasputin, or Gandhi?
The way you smiled of Gandhi has really thrown me off. Like, I kind of think it's Gandhi who said that, but I don't think it is Gandhi. I don't think it's Rasputin or Winston Churchill. I think for me it's probably Hemingway, because he's done a lot of traveling. He's interested in cultures around the world, and I think he'd kind of figure out that was the case. I'm gonna say Hemingway.
Final answer?
It's gonna be Gandhi, isn't it? I'm gonna say Hemingway.
Correct.
Woohoo!
Well done. I'll drink.
You pulled the wool over my eyes. No longer.
I smoked at Gandhi because I thought I'm going to chuck in a really stupid red herring, and if he goes for it, it's going to make me laugh. So I thought if I say Gandhi, why would Gandhi say that? And I was thinking if he says,
Did Gandhi even drink?
probably not.
No.
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
But it would have made me fucking laugh if you just said, "Oh, well, it's got to be Gandhi. He loved to drink." So, the Great Depression's happened. We're not sure where we're at as a nation. We're in a very bad space, and the prohibition makes less and less sense every day.
Yeah.
1932. Franklin D. Roosevelt campaigned on an economic revitalization, including the idea of bringing alcohol back. That was one of the things
Is that the New Deal?
It was, something like that was the basically the broad scopes of his economic plan. I don't know if that's what he's talking about in this moment, but yes, he wanted to bring. In fact, apparently he wanted to let it fuel the economy as a liquor tax. Was his idea.
Big up FDR.
Cool guy, man.
My guy.
He was the first, the longest serving US president, 3 terms and 12 years in total he was in office. Trump's going to beat that, but that's... hey,
we won't dive into
it's
the
not the
details of that.
It's not the pint-sized politics anyway.
I
so
would
let's,
love us to do, like, depending on what the audience thinks, if they do want to ask us to do that, I would love to do a Pint-Sized Politics episode.
Politics episode.
Oh, God damn
I
it.
feel like we're just going to kill everyone by doing that.
Yeah, who would actually listen to that? But, like, that's my day job. I love politics. So,
I'd love to talk about it as well. Anyway, so at this point, 13 years after it's been put in place. 13 years. So 2020, it became law. 1933, December 1933. It's almost 14 years. Finally, Roosevelt and everyone gets it away. This concept that America, land of the free, freedom, has decided to personally stop a freedom from being allowed towards themselves. Get it away. We don't want this. Did you know that is the only amendment in 27 that cuts something off?
Really?
Everything else is about giving you the giving of letting
right
you do
to
something.
bear
the
arms,
right to bear arms, the right to
vote.
the freedom of speech. This is the not
The right
right
to not drink.
not drink. Yeah, exactly. It's like this is the one, and it was the 21st Amendment that got rid of it. So they needed another. That's the point of an amendment.
So does the 17th Amendment still exist?
Yes. Well, it's the 18th, but yes.
So in the American Constitution, it has the 18th Amendment.
Yes.
You cannot drink alcohol.
Yep.
And the 21st Amendment says you can drink
Yeah.
alcohol.
I mean, it's obviously a lot more. I know.
bullshit.
How hilarious is that? It's literally when you put it as an amendment, it's there. It's difficult to get rid of. That's why they make it amendments. It's so difficult to do anything to the Constitution. That's part of the reason why they do it. And so they have to get rid of it. They literally have to add another amendment afterwards to go, look, this is not okay. 27 amendments, that's the only time they've had to actually cancel it out afterwards.
With another amendment.
With another amendment. Yeah. Right. Question number 10. Ding, ding,
Final
ding.
question.
Final question. You've done well so far. How are you feeling?
Right now, I'm gone.
Good.
But I'm enjoying myself. I'm finding this incredibly fascinating, but
Well,
I am drunk as fuck.
I'm here to give you, honestly,
I've had 7 drinks.
I'm here to give you an awesome story.
Whenever
Gold
you
dust.
say it's a good story, it typically does come
Mate.
through. So hit me with it.
Listen to this, mate. And there's no way you get this right, so I'm sorry. So good luck drinking. You're gonna have to drink.
Don't doubt me, Joe. It'll be your worst nightmare.
To be fair, actually, you might. Final question. Zach, could you please tell me, Charles Joan is considered one of the great heroes of all the stories of the sinking Titanic. But why?
He's a brewer on the ship, and he's a bartender or something, and he, I don't know, in terms of his place on the ship, he puts on a baby and a baby and a mum or something like that.
Puts what?
In terms of his place on the ship, but it should be him as one of the staff
to get off the
ship.
Okay.
He gives his place up. A bartender or a brewer just gives his place up for a baby and a job.
I tell you what, I commend you for your effort there. I appreciate it, but I don't think that's enough. So no, I think you're gonna have to drink because I think that's nowhere near enough what I'm looking for.
That's
so
fine.
cheers.
Cheers, pint-sized people.
Well done on surviving those questions, and let me tell you about the story of this man. Right, Charles was a 33-year-old Liverpudlian who was.
Damn it! Charles.
He was a Scouser who was the chief baker on the RMS Titanic. Chief baker. When the iceberg hit, Charles immediately went into action. He downed an incredible amount of whiskey. An incredible amount of whiskey, like an insane amount of whiskey. Like enough to kill someone.
Yeah.
And then he started loading lifeboats with women, children, bread and provisions from the kitchen. As the scene is happening, and you know how
pissed off his face,
drunk beyond belief, and you know how the bow of the ship, or the stern of the ship goes up, and it goes basically vertical by the end. He basically walks towards the stern, goes up to the very top of it as it's climbing up, and he literally calmly just waits there. And as it sinks into the ocean, he is the last man on the Titanic. He literally walks. This is true, apparently, that he walks off. As it's like sinking into the water, he walks off it. He walks off it into the water. And then, this not only makes him the last person on the Titanic, but as the rest of the crowd are screaming in this horrific freezing ocean, apparently -2 degrees in the Atlantic Ocean at that time, he is calmly paddling around, not feeling too much, waiting for someone to come save him. And apparently, he survives for over an hour, possibly even 2 hours. Now, most people in that environment die,
quickly as shock.
Yeah.
Thermic shock.
The shock, the stress, the trauma, the fucking freezing cold temperatures. Meanwhile, my guy, Charles, is chilling. He's literally just paddling out.
And when no space on a lifeboat for him.
And when they apparently he finds some empty, upside down lifeboat or craft or whatever, and he gets on it and eventually is saved. They're like, what the fuck? He
survives.
He's not. Well, hold on. He not only survives, but apparently he starts helping with the fucking survival effort once he's on board, and he's giving people aid as they need, and he survives and he dies.
Scousers, man.
He dies. He dies years.
I love Scousers.
He dies years and years later. He survives not only the entire ordeal, but obviously I'm sure something like that, as traumatic as that affects anyone, but he was able to deal with the situation with such a cold, hard stoicness, I'm drunk as fuck. I've got that, I've got that hubris in me. I can deal with anything.
Yeah, you beer coat.
Yeah,
you
exactly.
Got a beer coat on.
And apparently, this is debated. Apparently, one scientist believes that the reason that he drank so much but it didn't hurt him, to drink that deathly much, was because he was in such a bad way. But once he goes into the freezing cold water, the blood vessels that would be affected by the alcohol in his system are suddenly, they tighten because of the fact that he's in such cold water. So it essentially nullifies. It's like a rock and a hard place coming together. It's like this man is drunk so much.
Unstoppable force meets an immovable object.
He can
drunk
survive.
scouse versus freezing Arctic temperatures.
Mate, he can survive any of it, man. He's able to
it's
just
so
fucking
good.
survive
It's so
now, and he's
good.
able to literally survive out there for hours. And he's known as one of the legends of the Titanic.
You may not know this, Joe, but you do know this. But you may not know, but I am Scouse myself. I'm half Scouse.
You are half Scouse.
My fucking dad, he's a Scouser. So, my family, they're from Liverpool.
It's one of your better accents. Scouse.
It's a
One of your
great
better
place.
accents.
Fantastic.
But you know what's interesting is that he's on he's seeing a ship and there's people below him that are screaming and so frightened. And when you're that drunk, you're just kind of like, you know what? If I die, I die. I reckon I can handle this. And I love that of all the bad things that alcohol does, and there's a lot of bad things. That's a fucking awesome pro of that story. Is this guy just gets horribly drunk and goes, you know what? Let's fucking do this. Here we go. Let's come at you.
Come on then, Arctic water. Let's go. I'll have you.
Anyway, we're at the end now. We're at the end of the story. So I'm just going to quickly explain how it all finished. So obviously, the world, and America especially, has changed dramatically in this time. I mean, imagine the segregated culture. In fact, a good way to describe this is, imagine being a young boy that has been born in the 1890s, right? You are a boy that probably has a father that is not around much, isn't much around in your life. Your
probably
mum,
drunk as well.
Your mum raises you. Your dad goes off to the saloon, and your wife can't join him. This is the segregated nature of your society and how you see things as a child. And as you become a teenager, a world war happens, and suddenly you're fighting on the front lines. If you survive it, you come back to an America that is now ready to get rid of alcohol, which is something that your dad did all the time. So that's a bit weird that your country's now doing this. And suddenly, not only is everyone still drinking illegally out of nowhere, but also there are now speakeasies where you're meeting women for the first time, that this is normal and this is how things are. And it's just bizarre, right? It's like, how has this happened where my dad and my mum were so segregated, and now I'm just able to flirt with this woman across a bar, and this is how it works. Then the 1930s happened because there's a Great Depression, and all that money you'd saved up as a young man to give your life going forward is now gone, and you've got to inflation's destroyed you, and now you've got to build it up again. And your life is so difficult, and prosperity brings you to a point where you're ready to go, and then World War II happens, and now you're
in that, but alcohol, it's been banned and then unbanned in that time span.
In that time. And now you're in a space where you're in your Middle Ages, and there's now been 2 world wars, and your country is changing, it feels, every moment. And by the end of that world war, your country is now one of the prime superpowers worldwide. You have an enemy that you've never seen before in the Soviet Union. You've never been to the Soviet Union. You've never heard of them really until now. And now they are your prime arch nemesis. And not only they have nuclear weapons, but so do you. And you're at a time in the saloons of the 1890s is like a time of, carts and barely electricity in many homes. And now there's nuclear weapons.
You're an old man.
You're an old man. There's nukes that you have to
fighter jets.
This
and
concept
nukes.
of it's just the change that the American person would have to go through.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
Crazy change.
And that's the Prohibition. That's basically the story of it. There's many more things we could talk about it, but those are the main notes.
I'm incredibly drunk right now, but I found it inherently fascinating, and that's because, I just love history, and I hope you all love history. And thank you all for sticking with us for a full season of Pint-Sized History. We never thought, I think, that when we started this, we'd get 8 episodes or 9 episodes in, and we are here. I think for me, I thought we'd only get a few episodes in and then be like, do we want to do this? But we're here, and honestly, every episode, I'm loving it, and I'm really glad we took the decision to do it.
Absolutely.
And I hope you're all enjoying it as well. We'll probably be back after the Christmas period, maybe with a few special episodes along the way. But we thank you all for watching every moment so far, for supporting us on our journey, and we just want to make this the best history podcast for you that's possible. So thank you very much.
You're not going to come to me? You're not going to come to me and just going to start saying goodbye or anything?
That was a nice note. You ruined it.
What the fuck, man? No, I completely agree. I think that when we started this, we had this idea of chatting shit and talking about history and having our fun and doing everything. And it just, I find it strange that we're able to have people that are listening week in, week out. It's actually so awesome. And so we really appreciate it. And yeah, we will be back after Christmas we might do something special in the meantime, and we've always got stuff that we can post, so it's not like we're going to be gone.
We're not leaving anywhere.
We're not leaving.
We're not going
at all.
anytime soon.
But we want to do something special for the last episode, and after a few of these, I feel like this is quite special.
Hey.
I'm feeling quite merry.
I'm drunk as fuck. Cheers, Joe.
Cheers. You're gonna reach over. There you
See you later, guys.
See you later.
Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye bye.